Okay, let's get started. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes, I can
Okay.
hear you.
Good. Okay, very
Yes,
good. Well,
I can hear.
very good. Welcome, everybody. I'm very glad you could join us, and
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to the conversation. If
Yeah.
you haven't done it yet, and you can find some time, it'd be great if you could do the Survey Monkey survey. And I see you already introducing each other in the chat. We're going to be using the chat a lot during this session, so good to start dropping stuff in that box. So I thought I would start by introducing the panel. We have a panel today. Hasib Erfanullah. He has a PhD in aquatic ecology from the University of Liverpool, describes himself as a biologist turned development practitioner, worked for a wide range of international development organizations, academic institutions, donors, and the government of Bangladesh. And currently he's an international independent consultant on environment, climate change, and research systems. And he's a leading member of the AuthorAid community and an INASP associate. He also writes frequently for scholarly and mainstream media. So he's one of the conveners. We have 4 conveners. Next convener, Vanessa Weyrauch. She's the co-founder of Politics and Ideas and an associate researcher of the Center for the Implementation of Public Policies Promoting Equity and Growth in Argentina, CIPEC for short. She's worked in the field of policy and research for over 12 years, especially with Latin American think tanks and policymakers. And she has extensive practical experience with online platforms, specializing in innovative methods to facilitate learning and the design of future scenarios, such as the Presencing Institute's Theory U approach. Dr. Patricia Charlton, the third member of the panel, a senior lecturer in AI and data science, and the Institute of Coding lead in the School of Computing and Communications at the Open University in the UK. She is a knowledge engineer and a researcher on AI and cognitive science, the Internet of Things, and technology enhanced learning. She's also the co-founder of Creative Digital Solutions. And my name is John Young. I'm the executive director of INASP. I'm a veterinarian by training. I lived and worked in Africa, Asia, and Southeast Asia for about 20 years before returning to the UK, where I've been working for about the same amount of time at the Overseas Development Institute and now here at INASP, essentially on how to ensure that research and knowledge is at the heart of development. So that's the conveners of this whole session. And we also have several other colleagues from INASP helping us today. John Harl, who's the Director of Programs, Verity Warren, Head of Marketing, Communications and Business Development, Andy Lobes, Program Specialist who runs AuthorAid, Sian Harris, Communications Specialist, and Josie Dryden, Program Assistant. And Josie is on hand if anybody has any issues with connections or anything like that. You can contact her in the chat column, or I put the hang on, I'm getting the muddle here. We'll give you her email address later on. So just very briefly to talk about how we got to where we are today. There were some conversations between the 4 of the conveners about capitalizing on the opportunity presented by the DSA to bring together a diverse group of people to talk about how technology could help researchers in the South engage with policy and practice. And we thought rather than have a single event, it would actually be more sensible to have a process within which the DSA sessions are just part of the process. So it started with some conversations with colleagues on AuthorAid, and then the collaboration on Padlet, which I think several of you have contributed to. And if you haven't seen it yet, the address is there. You could go and have a look at the Padlet. And then we've got these 2 sessions today. The one this morning focusing more on challenges, and the afternoon we're going to look more at possible solutions to those challenges. And that we're hoping it's not going to end there. We're hoping that after the DSA, we will do more work on these possible technological solutions through application design workshop or workshops, And then the idea is to pilot the solution on the AuthorAid platform, and then to come together again sometime in early 2021 to see whether it worked. And you know, if there's sufficient interest in this, to start to build a community of practice around this challenge about how we can make better use of technology to help Southern researchers, to empower Southern researchers to engage with policy and practice. And I think now is when I hand over to Vanessa to talk about housekeeping things. I will do the slides, Vanessa.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you.
There we
For
go.
those who are coming just in now, if you want to introduce yourselves, your names, where you work and where you're from, it's a good opportunity to start getting to know each other. Though we'll have other chances, a lot of group work to do today together. Just some housekeeping rules. This is the more boring part, but it will allow us to have a good experience today. So as we had already mentioned, we're recording the session. So the fact that you're participating means to us that you are consenting to this recording. We are going to have a mix of group work, individual work, and a plenary. So we will try not to lose you, but if you experience any problem, please use the chat to reach out to Josie, or you also have her email address there too. During the large meetings and the plenary, we will mute everyone just to make sure that we can listen to each other very well, but we of course welcome your participation. So if you want to come in and talk, please, you can go to the participants list and raise your hand there if you want to speak, and we'll of course give you voice and are eager to receive your contributions. We will also take notes of today, so don't worry. We'll probably we're going to split into groups, so you're not going to miss anything. We will share the collective production. The subject has already shared his drawing. We have a drawer here, so if anyone also from the participant side wants to draw or take notes, we can also benefit from that talent. So you're welcome to do that. Very nice contribution. At the end of session 2, but also those who cannot come, we will share with you a link to a survey. We want to listen to your feedback and see how you have found the session and the overall work. We're also always looking for ways to improve and make this collective work, especially this new online setting, better. And we will also be using Menti. I don't know if all of you are aware. I'll give you more detailed instructions, but those who know it will do an ice-breaking activity soon, so that, and we're going to use Menti for voting too. So that's part of what we're going to do today. Do you want to turn to the next slide, please? So what is our proposal for this morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are? I'm at Argentina, so it's 7:30, but there are other people at the other end of the day. The idea is to share these, first to share with you these challenges. Some of you have already contributed, but maybe you didn't have the chance to read all of them. So we have synthesized the production, the collective reflection at Padlet, and we will share these. And our proposal is to do some first individual reflection around those challenges, and then share this reflection in groups, so that we can start finding out which are the ones that resonate more with us as a group and prioritize them. And that's because we want to get also in the afternoon, in session 2, we want to start working around solutions. That doesn't mean that these are that today we're only going to focus on some challenges, but this doesn't mean that the other challenges are not relevant. It's just to make sure that we start sketching ideas and potential solutions around technology for some of them. So the group work, once we prioritize, we will share that in plenary, and as I was mentioning, then we're going to vote and select together which ones are the ones we want to work on the next session while sketching solutions. John, you want to move on? So let's start with this, with an icebreaker. have a little fun before we get into the working mode. For that, I will ask you to go to menti.com. If you can open another window. If are you familiar? If you can raise your hand so that I know whether some of you, do you know, have you ever tried Menti? No? I think it's the first time for many of you. So you go there and you'll see that you have a little box where you have to enter this code. It's 815378. And we will share on a screen so that you will be able to see the responses from everyone. I'll just we'll share the screen, but you've got the information. Verity has just posted in the chat information. You have the link there. You can directly open that link and enter the code. So we'll wait one or two minutes, a couple of minutes, so that you can all get into there.
Whoever's sharing their screen at the moment, can you just let me share mine?
Yeah, John, can you let Verity?
I have stopped sharing my screen. I think, have I?
Yeah, Verity, I think you're coming in. Good. Oh, okay, we've got responses there. Great. So things that it looks like water is the main. Oh, it's changing as you come in. Great. Oh, orange squash. I would like to have one of those right now. I am drinking water too. Maybe some of you are having more than one, right? I just have a coffee and now water. Nice to see. Hot water, interesting. They say that's very healthy. Lemon tea, oh, Kenyan coffee. That's a good one. Great. So I see that everyone is very quick getting there. Let's switch to the second one, Verity, please. Now we'll see an example of why collective work is really useful and can be done in a very quick way. Try to think of a band or a musician that you would recommend other people to check out. This is a very good opportunity to promote a family member who's starting or who has been around music for a while. You can feel free to enter whatever band or musician you like. It's a good opportunity for us to get to know people in other bands and musicians in other countries. So let's see what you can come in. We will share this information, and this is useful information for those of us who do the video. Oh, great. Channel from. I love these. Great recommendations. I'm always looking for new music. So you see, more are coming in. Excellent. Oh, the Beatles, that's a classic. Almond Dunes. Barfast, there are several of them that I do not know. So after this session, when we take a break, we can get into Spotify and check some of these bands. We'll make sure we share them with you later on. Excellent. Thank you so much. What a variety. The colors reflect.
Bros, hello, bros. You did meeting. Don't say your bed is look boring like some people yesterday. For the arrest, for their birthday. You know, I saw you. I saw you. Not the street man who do.
Victor, if you can, I don't know if you're trying to contribute here. I can't hear you very well, but if you can put that in chat. Okay, good. Great, love it. Let's do one more and seize the group's experience and intelligence here. The next one, Verity, thank you. So that's an opportunity to see if any one of us could be a host or hostess. Where would you spend a season working abroad if you could go? If you could travel, where would you go? Let's see. We have people from different places here, so we might become host or hostesses. Bali, Kenya, great. Some are participating, I see there in the chat, Egypt, Canada, Kathmandu, Italy. Nice. Who else wants to share? Anyone in the travel mood? Oxford. Okay. We have several people from Oxford here who can host the person desiring to work abroad. Peru, interesting. I see Kenya as a star there. Great destination indeed. Nice, nice. Well, this is, I mean, this is not the same, but at least we get a flavor of what is working with people from different places during this session. Thank you so much. It's really good to see those contributions coming in. And there are places across, yeah, many continents that you're mentioning. So great. Thank you for that. Great. So if we can come back. I see all of you right now. Thank you so much. We are going to move on now, and I'm going to share with you John, if you can, yes, come back again. So now it is time to delve into those challenges. As John had already mentioned, the starting point for this collaboration is our Padlet, where many of you and several others who maybe could not come today, but did their contributions and reflections about 4 types of challenges that were selected among some members of Author Aid. So what we are, yes, John, if you can show the Padlet again, as you will see there, we were working this during some weeks, so there you see some solutions. We're going to work that in the afternoon, but on the right-hand side of the Padlet, we received many good reflections and contributions to these avenues of challenges. The first one had to do with how to access high quality, relevant and usable findings. The second one had to do with collaboration between researchers and policymakers, or channels, and the lack of, or the degree of channels we had right now. It was the second strand of challenges, and so people came in and contributed with considerations and sub-dimensions of that big chunk of challenges. The third one had to do with incentives and capacities of researchers. And we also opened up a fourth column that had to do with other challenges, right? To also receive reflections and not limit ourselves to these 3 main ones, but also open up for other sort of considerations. And what emerged there more strongly had to do with challenges that, of course, will resonate with many of us, that have to do with power, mainly with power and politics, right? That are underneath and are causes sometimes of the other 3 challenges. So our invitation today is to delve more deeply into these challenges and sense together with you which ones beneath these challenges are the ones that we are really concerned about, and that we feel we could do something about, focusing on the use of technology. We have, I think we cannot do it now, but later on, if someone can help within the groups to then showcase or show the drawing. Just after shared a link with a very nice drawing. I think that this visual capture of how we work together and the reflections is really, I hope you have received it before. It's really a great piece of work. Thank you for that, Dasapta. So what we're going to do now is we had facilitators of each challenge. I will invite members of our team to present to you a set of sub-challenges under each challenge. And then as a group, we're going to allow you to think about which strand of challenges resonates more with you and what you would like to work upon, so that we can split in groups and do more deeper work. And that work will be a combination of individual work and individual reflection, share that reflection, and then working together to prioritize and select challenges that we want to work upon in the afternoon, sketching for solutions, okay? So Angie, if you want to come in and present, yeah.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm having my own technical challenges right now, but so to summarize what we found under challenge number 1, which we're titling Access to Data and Findings, we summarized 5 things which came up in the Padlet, and they were the lack of access to high quality, relevant and usable research findings, and this is due to cost, internet problems and bandwidth. There are problems with lack of digitization of good research in the Global South, so that research was kind of invisible because it couldn't be found online. It was said that many researchers lacked the skills and knowledge in data analysis and how to use that data, and also how to find various sources of data. Also, institutions lacked the resources to actually do data management and the infrastructure to store data, and of course suitable hardware and the software to use data. And finally, there are problems with data sharing practices and protocols which were very limited and also unclear. And also, in many cases, researchers were unwilling or wary of actually sharing their data with others.
Thank you, Andy. I'll introduce challenges 2, which has to do with the channels for collaboration between researchers and policymakers. And what emerged here have to do with problems from, or challenges from both sides, right? Those who use policymakers using or trying to use evidence, researchers producing evidence, and what is in between. Some from what I call the demand side, the policymakers and the capacity and willingness to incorporate evidence in policy making. Participants and contributors found that there are many times high hierarchical barriers that deter this opportunity for continuous collaboration, along with frequently the need to face with very rigid or quite rigid and complex procedures to get to participate or to get a research commission from the policymaking agencies. Also, in general, there's a low degree of institutionalization of research within policymaking agencies, so it's not a general practice, and it's not clear how to reach out and to make that research available for those making decisions. And many times the policy priorities, maybe because they change too much as well, are not that clear for researchers. So that also deters in some way the potential for good collaboration. Then from the researcher side, producers of knowledge, one very important challenge has to do with the low visibility of research, the difficulties to make that research and that evidence available and visible to policymakers. And sometimes also a challenge is to find more effective ways to make local needs and priorities visible and clear to policymakers. And in between, people found that there's a general lack of platforms or forums, spaces that enable and allow this sort of collaboration. The very little opportunities that in general in southern countries we find to develop joint research questions. I mean that the questions are shared and are defined jointly, what we want to learn and what type of evidence we want to produce to, to answer which sort of questions. And also many times there's, again, even if there are rigid and complex procedures to get research into policymaking and get research commissioned, at the same time, there's a lack of guidelines on how to collaborate. So all these factors are really challenging the opportunity to sustain, create, and nurture good channels for collaboration. Let's turn to the third set. Hasib, if you want to come in.
Hi, everybody. We have heard the access to data and findings and how the channels channels of collaboration between policymaker and researcher. But let us look into what about the capacity? What are the challenges around capacity and what actually incentives we have? From the Padlet that was shown a few minutes back, we found quite a few challenges around this issue, and we have jotted them down into 4 different categories. The first one is researchers. Actually, is there any incentive for them to jump into translating their research into practice or policy making? That's the very important question. Sometimes researchers, maybe early career researcher or mid-career researcher, in most of the cases, they might not understand how policies are formulated, the process. In terms using the word legitimacy, often there's a question that whether the researchers who will be talking on behalf of their community, are they actually representing the community or not, which is a very interesting way of seeing things. There are examples from the global south that the people, the researchers, they are often quite have good connection with the policymakers, and it's a kind of a how senior you are, how reputed you are. So access to the elite is quite an interesting point when we looked into the capacity and incentive. And finally, it's a challenge for researchers in the global south. They often struggle to get funding to continue their tenure, their job, or get promotion. So not much opportunity or incentive to look into the policy making or contributing there. Now let us come to policymaker. We are not generalizing it, but in the global south, often we see that technical capacity or technical skills of decision makers or policymakers, even politicians, are quite limited in most of the cases. Although the digital penetration might be quite a lot in many of the countries nowadays. Another issue is trusting researcher. The processes, maybe it is related to not understanding how research actually being conducted and why we conduct research the way we conduct research. That's why there's a reluctance to use the research. And the other point is don't like research findings. There was a quote, often it happens that when the policy of the decision makers or the government doesn't kind of match with the research finding, often they try to overlook that. But are all these things have anything to do with how to communicate the research? Yes, there are some examples around this challenge that sometimes researchers they don't have sufficient skill to communicate their research because it is not only what you want to say, but you should say in a way that it is being listened to. For example, you have to avoid jargons or very technical terms. So these are the issues came up when we were doing the Padlet exercise. Apart from researchers, policymakers, and communication challenges, there are some systemic challenges. So we need to look into the system as a whole. Sometimes research are not actually aligned to the societal needs, societal challenges. Sometimes we do, as a researcher, we conduct research not looking into those. And when we say that whether research has been translated into practice or policy, in the global south, we don't often see enough examples that might inspire researcher to jump into translating their research into policy and practice. Of course, there are limited opportunity for capacity development. And one of the contributor actually focused on a particular word that in his or her country, I can't remember, that the issue is important, but there are so limited number of people are working on it that they are not into a critical mass to influence the policy making. That's a very interesting way of seeing things. And of course, we all understand whatever you do, often politics overrides everything. So that's the summary of this particular challenge on capacity and incentive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hasidia. I think that the last line goes across all the challenges, politics. So John can tell us a bit more about this.
Yes, I mean, I think that's exactly right. When we set up the Padlet, we had 3 columns, and then we had another column called Other Challenges. And while there were relatively few contributions in that column, most of them were about what we could call politics and power. And as Vanessa has explained, and as Hasib has just illustrated in the previous slide, these issues tend to cover the whole the whole spectrum. They get in the way of any attempt to try and use research more effectively. And it seems to fall into four areas. One is about elite capture of the research, development research field, particularly by northern elite researchers. They tend to dominate, and that tends to determine what research is done, and also the relationships between northern researchers and southern researchers. And not surprisingly, the northern researchers tend to get their way at the cost of the southern researchers. So there's that category. Another one is about research agendas, not only shaped by the northern researchers, but also by research donors in the north. Very often are more concerned with their own research agendas or funder priorities. And again, these tend to be misaligned with local priorities. And then research projects themselves tend not to engage in an equitable way with the local people in the local situations they're working. They don't regard local populations as equal partners in the kind of research process. And obviously that's essential. If we're going to try and find solutions to local problems, there needs to be a collaborative process to actually figure out what could possibly be done to address that. And very often that's disregarded. And a further extension of that is that research projects are very often therefore disconnected from the day-to-day realities of local communities. So this is the sort of fourth column, if you like, which has now got a name: politics and power.
Thank you, John. So this is a synthesis of a really good collaboration process with you and many others. Our proposal is to take on some of these challenges, dig a little deeper into sensing which of those resonate more with you, and also start to prioritize and think about which of these challenges could be addressed using and harnessing technology. John, if you can switch to the next slide. The proposal is that we build up groups, and we don't worry that we will go again and list those challenges. We don't pretend that remember all of them right now, but yes, the idea is to have some groups working on a strand of challenges. We have 4 strands, so probably we'll have to work with you and see which strand resonates or attracts you to work with. So we would split probably in 2 groups. We would have to select two sets of challenges and have some time to individually reflect on the sub-challenges under that strand, which ones are the ones that are of your concern, that really resonate with you and your context. And we will share that. Everyone will have a chance to think about it, write it, and share it, and so that we listen to all of us. And then within those that resonate more with us, do some thinking about which ones could be addressed using technology. So we will use a Google Doc where we will be capturing this process, and we will facilitate it. And we also want to allow some space for food for thought. So we'll have discussions, and if there are considerations that have to do with the challenges but are not, they do not fit into, okay, this is just a challenge that we can address with technology, but we should think about this. We also want to capture that sort of information. So our proposal is that you tell us if you can use the reactions bar, or even or raise your hand. I will go and we will try to see who wants to work in each group, and we have 4 groups, but we will probably have 2 groups. What do you think, John? Do you think 2 groups will be fine? We have around.
Well, let's just see. Let's see who's interested in which.
Let's follow people's good. So the instruction is this: if I'm going to go group per group, and you please have to raise your hand and let us know in which strand of challenges you would like to participate, and we'll split. We'll go to breakout rooms and work on that, right? And then everyone will share, so we'll all have the opportunity to then comment others. But just think about these 4 levels and which are the sort of challenges where you feel more attracted to discuss and to interchange ideas with colleagues. So who would like to participate in challenges related to access to data and findings? We have Meron there. I just have to go back to gallery view. So who's, Josie, are you taking note? Leave your hands up.
Yes, so I've got Meron and Sapta so far.
And Sapta, okay. Okay, let's see. Let's move to challenges 2, challenges related to channels for collaboration among researchers and policymakers. Who would like to discuss on 2? Yes, someone is in the chat. Amma, I can't see everyone. Josie, can you? Let's see. I've just
2 people for that group, is that right?
Yeah, everyone's voting. Okay. Let's go to 3. Who would like to discuss capacity and incentives of researchers? Yeah, I mean, you could raise your hand or use it in the chat. We're not many people, so you're welcome to write in the chat too. What do we have for 3?
Can we participate to more than one channel?
Well, we don't have time. I see 3 and 2. Let's see how many we have, because I don't think we will do the 4 of them. So, but maybe, I mean, if we have more time, we can think about that. But put first the one you would prioritize, and then we'll see. So we have, okay, we have Chica for 3. Who else for 3? Okay.
I can see one blue hand up.
Yeah, sign up for capacity 3, priority. We have 3 for 3, I think. And how about 4? We know that this is not directly related and it's a big one, but we wanted to leave the space open. Someone for 4? Okay. Okay. So has everyone, I think we have votes, everyone has selected, right?
I might have missed it, but I've got a couple of people who I haven't assigned for groups. Can I ask them where they'd like to be? I've got Aurelia, Fonmaleo and Victor left over.
Okay. If anyone, Victor, Aurelia, and
Fonmaleo.
Yeah. If you can just write in the chat box which group you would like us to host in. You can do that by chat. Yes, I see.
It looks as if we just have one person interested in challenge 4. So it seems to me we don't have a critical mass, I think, to have a substantive discussion about challenge 4. My inclination would be to focus on 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, and of course 4 is more than welcome.
We've actually got 2.
All those considerations to integrate them into the other groups because they are very related.
Although I see we've now got 2 for 4, so and some of the other groups have only got 2 in, so we could just have small groups.
Already I can move to 4.
We've got
yes, is that she could move to 4.
Funmalayo and Rising.
Yes, she's suggesting no, Rising.
Merging 3 and 4.
From merging 3 incentives and capacities with power and politics. Yes, we could do that.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Sign up. Yes, I knew that it wasn't Rising. Sign up. I think that's a good suggestion. Yes.
That means we've got
3 and 4.
We've got rather a lot of people in that group and not very many in challenge 1 and challenge 2, though, I think. Is that right? Josie, are you keeping numbers?
Yeah, I'm not keeping track, sorry.
4 people per group. Though people, I think I've just seen in the chat, a couple of people have changed. So for challenge 1, I've got Desapta and Meron. For challenge 2, I've got Okere and Amma. And for challenge 3, I've got Rising, and Chica. And for challenge 4, Aurelia and Fun Maleo.
Oh, so it's even.
Yeah, well, maybe we do all 4 then, but be able to have very intense discussions.
Yeah, or we can have 1 and 2 together and 3 and 4 together, 4 and 4.
Maybe that's the way of doing it.
And yes, I
Okay.
will do that. So we can, I mean, everyone can talk about the things that resonate with each other. Let's merge 1 and 2, 3 and 4. And of course, then we have those who wanted 1 and 4, don't worry that we have a plenary then to reconvene and continue the conversation. So don't worry about that. Thank you so much. Let's, what you will do, what will happen now is you'll get an invitation for a breakout room. So
Okay.
please accept it. This will lead you and we will all move into 2 separate rooms. We will work as a group and then we will reconvene. We have a half an hour to do this group discussion and work and then share our collective thinking with others, okay? So please accept the invitation. Thank you.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hey. Hello.
Hi. Hello. Hello, Hasib.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
We're not seeing you.
No, I can't do video.
All right.
Okay, no problem. Hi, Zainab.
I have challenge with data. I have challenge with data.
Okay, so now we facilitators need to decide. I think who's going to sort of lead and facilitate, because we don't want to be doubling up. So this is combining challenge 3 and challenge 4. So maybe we just have one note taker, or should we maintain 2 different forms?
We need to show both challenges, isn't it, while we discuss it. Can we start with 3, then move into 4?
I think it's worth, well, I think we should keep the 2 different note takers on the different forms because we've got them prepared for that. And otherwise we have to sort of scrabble around to try and change it.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I also suggest we have like a kind of time limit so we don't get absorbed into one challenge and then we have very different.
I think we have 30 minutes. Oh, hang on, it says rooms are going to close in 57 seconds.
Something's gone wrong, I think.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening here.
So it looks like we may get thrown out and then need to come back again. And
I think so.
Apologies about that. So it wouldn't be a Zoom call without something going very slightly wrong. So it's the new tradition for 2020 that every call must have a large amount of. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can see you.
Yes. So it's very nice to put some voices to some people I've spoken to by email. So I think I've spoken to.
Yeah.
My apologies, everyone. My internet dropped, so I think I've brought you all back here. But I'm going to put you all back into the group. So
Okay.
We're missing each other.
There we go.
Okay, let's do it again.
Hello again.
Hello.
Hey.
Okay, so who's going to show? We're going to start with challenge 3. Shall I share that?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Since you have it, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I have that. And we can look at one for a few minutes and then look at the other.
Sure.
Is that showing now?
Yeah, the desktop. Yeah.
There you are. It should get bigger now. There we are.
So the idea is we will spend some time, a few minutes, and we have gone through it, a few minutes back. So the idea is in the chat box, we will be writing our own reflection, whether these resonates with ours or not. And you can just re-emphasize on some of the challenges which is already mentioned here, or you can elaborate certain issues that you feel that yes, it is more important than the others. So just have a look through the list, and please do write your thoughts in the chat box. We have Patricia. She will be capturing those and putting into the table that Vanessa actually showed. So let us have a brief moment of thinking and writing in the chat box. We are now focusing on challenge 3 only. While you write your thoughts, please do mention challenge 3, then write it. Because I can see that the chat boxes still have got all the chat we had the last few minutes. So please do write challenge 3, then write your text. Thank you. We have been receiving some interesting thoughts already. Thank you very much for these. Let us wait for a few more minutes so that everybody can actually share their thoughts in the chat box. Thank you.
Well, this is not where I want to be. So this is not where I want to be. I don't know. I don't know if you
Chika, are you saying that you are not planning to be in this group? You want to go to 1 and 2?
Yes, I don't know. What I want is building my capacity. Yeah, sourcing. Yeah, I don't know which group that belongs to.
This is the group that is looking at capacity,
incentive,
and incentives. Yes, so it's got stuff about lack of communication skills, etc. So that's a capacity issue. Policymakers lack technical skills. So this is both capacity and incentives, I think. Hasib, are we going to move on to challenge 4 now, or we will finish challenge 3 and then come back to challenge 4?
I think we can capture the both the challenges or thought first, then analyze each. And Patricia, have you got these challenges?
Yeah, I've captured them.
Excellent, thank you.
So shall I stop sharing the screen then?
No, I think you can go to the next slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So now you will be moving to challenge 4, because this group is about challenge 3 and 4. Please do look into the slides. And similarly, what you have done for challenge 3, please do it for challenge 4. And Sean will be capturing those in the table that was shown. Please don't forget to write challenge 4 when you put your thought in the chat box. Thank you.
Clarify what whoever wrote Northern Capture means by Northern Capture.
Oh, it's essentially the first bullet point. Elite, especially Northern elite researchers, tend to dominate the field.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure how we deal with moving from one group to another. Maybe ask Josie. If you could email Josie, Chika, I think she can move you.
I'm informing Josie.
All right.
Do we want to move on to sort of technology aspect of it?
I think now we have got sufficient input for challenge 4 as well. John, now I think we should move to the table for challenge 3, so that we can actually see what we have in the second column.
I've stopped sharing.
Just one thing, there's some comments here. So from Chika, funders are often not very interested with solving problems, but with extracting data. Is that a challenge 4 or challenge 3?
I mean, I think they overlap quite a lot, don't they? The fourth bullet points of challenge 4 actually are very similar to all the challenge, all the points in challenge.
So just, sorry, who's the note taker for challenge 4? Or did you put that into challenge 4?
I've nearly done it. I haven't put that one in yet because it appeared while I was typing the last one in, but copying the last one in. But yeah, I'm putting it in 4.
Okay. Researchers in developing world are hardly recognised.
That's 3, isn't it?
Could be. Okay, I'll take that one. And the other 2 are labelled as 4.
My inclination would be just to put them all in one table, because I think they kind of overlap, don't they?
Yeah,
the thing is, we've got 2 tables at the moment.
Yeah, we've got exactly 2 tables, so I think it does. I mean, the main thing, John, is they're both captured. We've captured both things, so that's the key thing. I can I'll share table 4.
3.
Sorry, table 3.
Have you shared, Trish?
I'm just getting to it now.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, it is coming up. Oh, excellent. Yeah.
Okay. So what we have about policymaker, research incentives. Again, the sort of northern focus, so rather dominating the perspective. This, I think, is interesting about researchers, about promotion rather than policy implication. I think that's to do with the drivers around career progression, which is quite a common problem globally. Lack of critical mass. The frameworks on incentives into the research function, and that's an interesting one. I think that's quite a complex one as well. So we've got quite a few different aspects here. Do we want to try to look at challenges that could be addressed using technology? So would that be useful to start to pull that out, where we think technology could be used for these challenges?
Yeah, I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah, I think we can go through the whole list so that we can have an idea and then start working for populating the column 3.
Okay, so if we start with the first one, policymaker skill to use research, could this challenge be addressed using technology? Do anybody have any particular thoughts on that? Let me see.
I mean, I guess you could say online. You could have a online training. Using platforms for online training. And that's a form of technology, I guess.
I'm thinking that before this platform for online training, we should consider a platform, first of all, to bring researchers and policymakers to the same table. If I'm to talk about my country, for example, whilst we were populating the Padlet, I searched for any platform where policymakers, by policymakers, I mean parliamentarians, politicians generally, if there was a platform for them to meet with researchers and even the local community, I found just about 3 in the entire country, and was only one that was active. So I think, first of all, there must be a platform for them to meet first, and then there will be an encouragement for them to listen to researchers.
Interesting thought. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jenny.
So this comes back to sort of what in education we often talk about community of practice, so sharing across participatory approaches and things like that, where we see the different perspectives.
Absolutely, I agree.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I think in addition to having platforms for training and platform to encourage researchers and policymakers to work together, we need a kind of network where we share information, which I think technology will have to share information. Because having worked a little bit with policymakers, particularly here in Nigeria, I observe they do not have so much time to go through most of the things we write. But if we have a platform that works like probably Twitter, Facebook, something like that, that just pops up the information to them on their phone and catches their interest, they could go through it and probably get in touch with such a researcher and work with them.
If I may expand.
Can I say? Hello?
Okay, just a minute, please. Can I just expand Victor's point a little and go a little deeper into what I think may be the root cause of the problem we're having? It is that if you look at the various committees, I'm sorry, I'm assuming that Victor is Nigerian too. If you look at
Yes, I am Nigerian.
Good. If you look at the various committees that we have at the parliament in Nigeria, there's nothing that refers to that. None of them has anything to do with bringing policies and researchers together. So maybe one of the first things we should do is have a committee, or maybe expand an existing one, like maybe the one on education, for example, to have an arm that will bring researchers and policymakers together. Because I think for Twitter, for example, if something negative is put on Twitter against a politician, they will respond. But if you put anything, you could try it today, if you put anything on a lack of platform for researchers and policymakers to meet, you probably won't get any response, even if you hashtag a particular politician. So first of all, I think first thing will be, let us have a platform that is meant to address that. And then we can now think of bringing them together, and then we can think of having like a repository of information where all of them will look into and see which one will be of priority.
I completely agree with you.
So it's not so much the committee as the platform, there, an electronic platform. Yeah. Okay. No, I agree.
I think I also agree with Zainab and Victor, because if we have like a database where we have the research findings and where policymakers can have access to, it will also be a solution to the problem. And like Victor said, that many of them don't have the time to read the long literatures that researchers write. So if we just have a database that has just the findings, which they all have access to.
Can I ask, what features would this platform have? This platform sounds like a great idea, but what would it have?
I'll just say that's for this afternoon. All we're doing now is identifying.
Sorry.
But that's exactly the focus of the afternoon. Slow down.
Yeah,
slow
sorry,
down.
I'm jumping ahead. Got too excited.
I'm worried about time. Do we know how much more time we've got?
Yeah, Josie's just told us we've got 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. So should we have
I also want to add that if we have such platforms, you know, researchers usually, when we design our research objectives, we don't involve policymakers. So if we have such platforms where you have collaboration with the policymakers, so they are involved in the research even from the beginning, from inception, they help, they design the research objectives together with the policymakers. So at the end, the policymakers are also looking forward to the findings, and they know that it's going to be relevant to them.
You mean this platform will facilitate that?
Yes, it can also do that. Yeah.
Okay.
So it can be like an avenue for collaboration. Between the policymakers and the researchers, because the problem of trust is also there, because the policymakers don't usually trust, you know, some of the research findings that come out from our educational institutions.
And the converse is also true that most researchers have very little trust for the politicians.
For politicians too.
Yes, and then we researchers also, we need to have the political mind, you know, to play our politics well, to be able to attract the policymakers.
Can I just say I agree with that 1,000%, but I'm not sure how technology can solve that. So I think it needs to go in the food for thought. But if we've only got 10 minutes left, should we just accept that we don't have time to do the other set of challenges? Because I think what we need now to do is to try and narrow these down, don't we, to the top, however many we want to take forward. But
can we just, out of the column 3, can we highlight, say 3 or 4, isn't it, John?
Well, it's as many as we want, but they.
Sure.
I mean, it seems to me we're talking about, in terms of technology, we're talking about a platform which somehow brings together policymakers and researchers, and that's actually in many of them, isn't it? So it would seem to me that a platform bringing together researchers, to bring together researchers and policymakers. But is there anything different in this list? Or is that really the one point?
So if you look, sorry, I was just going to say, if you look down the list of the sort of a refinement of the problem area that we were looking at, the challenge area, there is this common idea, theme coming through, which is, as you said, this platform, this sort of collaboration, this better way to inform each other, to work together, to look at the stakeholders and to look at the context of the information, and to help policymakers understand that information, and to help researchers, I think, to understand policymakers' perspective. I think that's the kind of collection. I don't know if there are other things that have come out of that. That was my kind of summary. I don't know if anyone else has got something to add on that. How's that capturing?
Yeah, Patricia, I do agree with you. That's basically the idea. But I think it also has to be founded on a framework.
Founded on a framework, yes. Yeah. Okay.
We need to develop a framework for that, so that it is a well-guided platform that needs to be founded on the framework.
So I often use the term responsible design approach. I don't know if that would meet with your thinking, or if that's you know, so bringing in as
yeah, it meets with the idea of bringing in a well-designed framework, responsible design. Yeah, that's all right.
So this is what underpins the platform. We need to think really clearly about what does this need to do, who do we need to attract, what kind of information do they need, and then the technology bit is the platform, which is informed by that and structured in accordance to that. I'm wondering if that's the main idea that's coming out of this section, whether we should have a quick look at the other one just to see if there's something completely different I think this is a really strong thing to take forward.
I'm just starting to, I was just starting to type your message actually, John, to say, I think I agree with sticking, I can show you challenge 4, but actually there's a really strong overlap. And I suspect that when we look through the things there, we will identify the same answer.
Okay.
Would you like me to show you, or should we stick with, I mean, it's all the same things about the disconnect between policy and research.
I know you well, Sean, I trust you, but colleagues might want to see you. But no, I mean, I think that's fine. So if that's the case, then we've got one avenue where technology might be able to help, but it needs to be done in the right way. Is there anything else in here? Because, and that's fine, it may be that we can only take one forward. Is there anything else in here?
There were some very good non-technology things in Challenge 4, which I'll share afterwards, which is just about terminology and things, which is a kind of food for thought rather than just to say that.
We have 3 minutes left.
Okay, I think in that 3 minutes, one thing I would just want us to quickly add, it's the capacity. Whether we create a platform, it's founded on a responsible design approach, we need capacity for everybody to work with the platform. So capacity becomes a key issue here again.
So can I write that as the platform should support capacity building?
Capacity, yes.
So that the optimum use of the platform can be possible. Okay.
Yeah. Trish, just to remind you that Verity is going to have to try and distill these into a single set. I'm just wondering whether we could highlight this platform to bring researchers and policymakers together, and then that's the thing, and then everything else is a kind of elaboration of that, isn't it?
Okay, so I'll put that at the top. Can you just repeat that again, John, how you phrased that, please?
Well, it's actually already in there. Platform bringing researchers and policymakers to work together. It's 1, 2, 3. It's the
this
first
one.
Yeah, that one.
Okay, yeah. I'll put that one at the top, and I'll.
Because then in the next session we can discuss it and elaborate on it. But at least then Verity knows what she's got to pull out of this one.
And I'll put it in bold and underline, and then I'll add these 2 things that sort of a subsection. Oh, actually, these 3. The framework. The last 3.
Exactly, and that's dimensions of it that are really critically important. Yeah.
Could I add something?
Sure.
That the realities also of policy making in the South is there's a national level and the local level, the local government level.
Yeah.
If there is a platform, then there has to be linkages between the national and the local level government. And also, I think also really unpacking who is considered a researcher in this context, because many are researchers, but we have no way of really identifying you and authenticating, are you a researcher who is able to produce research that policymakers can use? So also that clarity.
Yeah.
I think that will come into the framework we're talking about. So that should be more points for us in terms of the design approach.
Yes, I think you're right.
We have 20 seconds left.
Can use. Okay. Right.
Have you saved, Trish?
Saved now. I'm going to re-upload that because I had to download it to get it to share. All right, I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'll see you all on the other side.
Right.
Thank you.
There's just one thing which came from 4, which was national guidelines.
Well, we seem to be back in the plenary, but where are our colleagues?
As it happens in the physical meeting, if you are having a meeting in a very big venue, you can get lost from the,
yes,
from the plenary main room to the.
Yes.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So many familiar faces. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
We all got pulled out
Yes.
our hairs from the room, right? Don't you feel like that? Talking about technology and what technology can do. Okay, we are. What we're going to do is we're going to share the group work. But before that, because we know that we've been sitting for a while and thinking, we suggest that we all can take a break. John, how are you? Are we with time?
Well, I've just, we're supposed to finish in 20 minutes. So if we take a break, then... So
okay, that's why I was asking about time. I was not thinking about time.
Unless people want to stay on longer, I would suggest we go straight into the plenary. Certainly in our group, some good points came out. So if we can at least look at those and then decide what we take forward into the afternoon, I think that would be good.
I just need time to put them all together. So wait, maybe 2 minutes.
Well, maybe we could do what we were going to do, Vanessa. Just anybody got something interesting they want to show us and tell us about?
Yeah, let's do that just to move a bit. If
I will
go around and
I'm
see
going to
if
show
you can find
this.
something interesting.
Put the Kit Kat in the chat box.
Because I haven't had time to eat it yet.
I have a crown.
Ah.
I have a torchlight.
Who else? Who else? I want to see other things.
That's very... to dazzle us with his light.
That's the big one.
I have to turn my camera back on, but I have my monsters with me.
Oh, excellent.
With me all the time.
Dasapta has his mask, which we'll all be wearing in the UK very soon.
Yeah, actually, I'm in the car right now.
Okay.
Great. Okay, John, do you want to go ahead?
How are you doing, Verity?
Okay. Yes, we're waiting for Verity to pull things up. Anyone else has something or wants to grab a glass of water?
Very good.
Oh.
Here we go.
I've just put them into a Word document. I haven't just as they were in the table. So some of them might need some explanation. I think 3 and 4 I wasn't quite sure about, but let's.
Okay, I'm supposed to be chairing this. So basically, what we thought at this stage is we would literally just go down the list and item by item ask for any clarification we want on that, and while we're getting the clarification, Verity might tidy up the words a bit, and then we should end up with a shorter, succinct list, and we just need to decide which we take forward into the afternoon. So, does anybody want to ask any questions about the first one? Sorry, who's that? Does anybody want any greater clarity about this self-archiving? Or is that quite clear? If it's quite clear, we can just move on to the next. I can't see anybody waving vigorously, so shall we just move on to the second one?
John, could you please give us another minute? Just to read.
Oh, just to read them. Okay.
Can I ask for some clarification about what you are thinking with the grid computing infrastructure?
Well, hang on. The idea is we work down from the top systematically. So as soon as everybody's had a chance to look at them, then we can just work our way down. So is everybody ready yet? We're not looking for perfection. We're not looking for absolute understanding here. We're just trying to identify issues, ideas which we will take forward into the afternoon. So ensuring outputs are self-archived in an appropriate research repository, and that sounds quite clear to me. Should we just leave it like that and move on to the next one? I can't see anybody waving. I'm not sure how I can see all the participants. That's the problem. If you could raise your hand in the participants column to indicate you want to say something. So technology that is free and open source to publish. Again, that's fairly straightforward. Does anybody want to discuss?
I see a raising hand there.
Where's it? Oh, yes, raising, yes. Okay.
Raising hand to support, yes.
Support.
Okay. Oh, you're supporting it, voting for it, okay.
Good.
Okay, so let's carry on down. Grid computing infrastructure developed on a national or regional basis. Anybody want to ask anything about that or make a comment about that? Or do we just, yes. we're going to come back and vote on these to decide which we take forward into the afternoon.
If I may say something, or the person who actually proposed, can they explain a little bit that grid computing infrastructure at different levels?
Okay.
And so, how, I would also like to know how, I think we can merge grid computing, that point on grid computing and ensuring that outputs are self-archived. It probably will come to the same thing.
Maybe I could share the condition in Indonesia. Our team is actually proposing the same idea to Indonesian government, because Indonesia government has installed a big server, and then what we have now is RIN. RIN is in English is National Scientific Repository to store data. Yeah, so we have that now, and then funded by the government. And then we also have an OJS cloud system. So people who wish to start a journal, scientific journal, then they could just apply to the Indonesian Science Foundation for an account, so they can manage their journal in the government server. Maybe our experience, our condition relates to that statement about grid computing.
Okay, that's a really good example. But it sounds as if it should stay in the list. This is something we could come back to in the afternoon. And then technology exists that's free and open source to publish research. That seems fairly straightforward to me. Does anybody want to ask any questions about that? Just to clarify what the idea is, not to actually go into it. We'll go into it in more depth in the next session.
Yeah. I think that's also from me.
Okay.
my sentence. So we have those free and open source technology, but at the end we end up with not free and not open source technology to get the prestige, to get the acknowledgement, right? Because for instance, in Indonesia we have so many diamond open access journal. We are second place after UK, I think. But at the end, people here still chasing to publish to medium or journals that very expensive to pay to go open access. Yeah. So from on the other side, we have to look for the free and open source technology. But on the other side, we need another kind of technology that we have to pay to get the acknowledgement and prestige, of course. That leads to the incentive. Yeah, I think that's all.
Okay, I mean, so that sounds like another really good idea we could develop a bit further in the afternoon. What's this next one down? Supporting engagement and collaboration. Where's the technology in there? Whose point is that?
We didn't have a huge amount of time to talk about challenge 2, so this was mostly pulled out from the chat discussion, and I think, Amma, it was a point that you were making where we just said we need technology to help better engagement and collaboration, but it might be similar to what's down here under challenge 3.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Is that the same sort of thing? Or maybe we should get somebody from...
Yeah, but it's not only about publishing and share research, but I think the point had to do like to allow interaction from the very beginning, right? When designing and implementing research. Not sure whether technology can play a role, but I think that was the main point. Sorry, Amma, do you want to come in?
Yeah, so I'm thinking that technology can play a role in bringing researchers and policymakers together so that, I mean, there are tools for both parties to work together. I don't know how to sort of put it, but we need to find a solution to help both parties to engage and share outputs or something like that.
I mean, Amma, that does sound very like what's under challenge 3 here, platform to bring researchers, policy makers to work together.
Okay, that's fine.
But there was
platforms and tools maybe too.
Yeah, there was. Does anybody who was in that group want to elaborate a bit on that? Because although that's the one sentence, there's a lot of other ideas underpinning that which are quite important.
So you mean in challenge 3, when we were writing that down, so you're right, exactly down the side of elaborating the sort of idea of challenge 3, this capacity building and collaboration. There was the idea that the platform would be a way that you would start working with the policymakers from the beginning. They would be included. There was a need for both researchers to understand politicians and politicians to understand researchers, and to build that community of trust. And developing a kind of iterative participatory approach into building this community's engagement, and the platform to support that, that would assist in that sort of exchange. That's what I sort of understood from the discussions that were happening. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything to that.
Can I add something on challenge 3?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The other problem is national bias. I have this example. Journalists here or a policymaker here in Indonesia tend to give more trust to articles written by non-Indonesian and published in non-Indonesian journals. So I think that is also the problem, because even if I have this research about water contamination, very important research, I publish it clear enough in the national journal, I think I don't get enough attention unless I know somebody to talk directly to him or her about my research. Unless I do that, then I don't get enough attention for my research. Another case, if I publish it in somewhere outside Indonesia, maybe the journalist would then my paper would go into their radar and then get more attention. Yeah, I think that's also a problem in challenge 3.
I mean, can I say I agree with you 1,000%. I'm struggling to see how technology could help with that. But I do agree with you. I think that's a really fundamental problem. It's different in different countries. There are some countries which favour national research over international research, but in other countries it's exactly how you said. But I'm not sure there's a technology solution to that, or do you think there might be?
Because I don't think it's a technology problem anymore. Yeah, okay. I don't think it's necessary.
I think, John, the issues that are being mentioned, where there is no direct, but there are some myths or biases which could be overcome by the platform or tools of engagement, so that those biases, myths can be debunked through bringing them together. Otherwise, it's very difficult.
Okay. So this is a dimension of a really important dimension of the platform and how to structure it so that it overcomes some of those challenges.
John, can I just ask a question about ORCID, and if an approach like ORCID ties in there, where you have somewhere where researchers track, like publishing track record is visible, so that a national researcher can show that they've been published in a wide range of journals, would that improve trust and the credibility in their research?
Yes, I think so.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I think ORCID is still quite, there's still quite little awareness about ORCID across southern research countries. There's still, for instance, now I have an ORCID account for some time, but I know of a group of a large number of my peers who don't know what ORCID is. So you cannot use that to create trust. We will need another system to create trust that is quite easy.
So I was just going to say something related to it. So technology can't solve the trust problem, but what it can be is it can be a catalyst to help change. So it can help us connect and communicate and perhaps represent things in slightly different ways, so that we get more, a better voice and so on, and sort of bring communities together. I mean, equally it could be divisive, but in this setting, it can be a catalyst. So it can support how to build that. So starting the communications and having a place where you represent those communications, and you share that information and knowledge, and learning about, valuing the different perspectives can help. And that's a process of building trust. So I think one of the things that came out of challenge 3, or in the discussion earlier, was that policymakers don't necessarily understand what researchers are doing. Researchers don't necessarily understand what policymakers need. This is true across all the globe. It's not, and it's when you start to bring those stakeholders together, you start to get a change in understanding. And sometimes the platform is a way of supporting that, but really it's the people that bring the change in that process. But what the technology can do is make that communication easier and more contextualized and effective to those groups of people who want to come together.
Okay, we're running out of time. We've got 5 minutes left, but I think actually this has been really excellent, because it seems to me we've got four topics that we could spend more time on together in the afternoon. What we were planning to have a Mentimeter to vote to see who's interested in which. Do we need to do that, or could we just say we'll take these 4 forward in the afternoon and split up into groups and work on these?
I think we could take these 4.
We just take these 4 forward. Okay.
I think we should take these 4.
Okay. So that's brilliant. So that makes wrapping up this session much easier. Do you want to save that, and then I will share the final slides. If I can find it. Okay, let's see if I can do that. This. Okay, there we go. Can you all see that? Yeah, okay. So very good. What next? As I said, this afternoon we've got another session starting at 4:15, 16:15 UK time, which is in about 3 hours and 15 minutes from now. So, and if it's a Sapto, that's going to be very late for you. I don't know if you're going to join. But the idea is in that session we will take forward some of these ideas that we've identified this morning. The Zoom address is the same. We will start at 16:15. You can ignore the second bullet point here. We don't need to vote what we're going to work on. We've already identified those 4 issues. That's great. Thank you very much for that. It would be helpful to get an idea of how many of you are planning to come back for the afternoon. And I wonder whether we could ask those of you who are planning to come back for the afternoon to raise your blue hand in the participants column, so that we just have some idea of whether you're going to come back. I don't seem to have a hand to raise. I think that's because I'm a co-host. I'll do a thumbs up, shall I?
I think I also don't have a hand.
No, Victor, you will have. Just click on the participants.
You have to click the participant icon. All the participants will appear.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it looks as if...
Okay.
Yeah, this looks good.
They see the blue hand.
Victor, are you going to come back, not wanting to put you on the spot?
No, Thank you, Chika, for that.
I will be back.
You'll be back, very good.
I will be back, definitely.
Excellent.
It's been exciting.
Thank you very much.
I want to continue being a part of it.
Very good, okay. Thank you. So we hope to see most of you this afternoon, and we may get some other participants as well. If you're not planning to come back this afternoon, and that's absolutely up to you, but if you would like to remain engaged with this process as we take it forward, then just put your name and your email address in the chat box. Unless you're one of the people we've invited. If we've been emailing you already, don't worry, we will let you know about everything that's going forward. But if you're not on that email list already, just make sure you put your name and your email address in the chat box, and we will make sure we send you the report that we produce and give you the opportunity to engage with the process as we go on, as I explained at the beginning. And that, unless I've forgotten anything, is that. Just to say thank you all very much. I think that's been a really interesting discussion, and I really look forward to taking these ideas forward in the afternoon. Fellow conveners and other helpers, have I forgotten anything?
No, I think we're fine. Unless someone has a question or a comment before leaving. Someone.
Just if we could also people could remember to do the pre-survey, and we will be sending out a post-survey.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank you all very much indeed. And conveners and facilitators, I think we should stay online just to check we know what we're doing in this afternoon. But the rest of you, enjoy your break, enjoy the other sessions, go and see the plenary, enjoy your lunch or whatever meal it is at this time of day, and we'll see you again a bit later on. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Nice to see you.
Thank you all.
Okay, let's get started. welcome back to everybody who was involved in the morning session. It's great to see you again, and welcome to the new people who have just joined for the afternoon session. What you're seeing, in case you're interested, is a diagram produced by one of the participants from the morning session, a guy called Dasupta from Indonesia. So sadly, it's the middle of the night for him, so he's not able to join us this afternoon. But this is a wonderful picture he put together of the process that we've been going through so far to start to think about what constraints are there in enabling Southern researchers to be better to engage with policy and practice to solve local solutions that came up through the Padlet pin board. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But anyway, that's what you're seeing, a wonderful picture. So why can't I move the slide on? There we go. So just a very quick recap so that you know who's here. We've got the four conveners of the session. That's Dr. Hasib Irfanullah. He has a PhD in aquatic ecology from the University of Liverpool, describes himself as a biologist turned development practitioner. He's a leading member of the Author Aid community and an INASP associate, also writes frequently for scholarly and mainstream audio. Vanessa Weyrauch, also a convener of this session, is the co-founder of Politics and Ideas and an associate researcher for the Center of the Implementation of Public Policies Promoting Equity and Growth in Argentina, SHIPEC for short. She has extensive practical experience with online platforms, specializes in innovative methods to facilitate learning and design of future scenarios. And the third convener, other than myself, is Dr. Patricia Charlton, Senior Lecturer in AI and Data Science and the Institute of Coding Lead in the School of Computing and Communications at the Open University. And she's a knowledge engineer and a researcher on artificial intelligence, cognitive science, the Internet of Things, and technology-enhanced learning. And my name is John Young. I'm the Executive Director of INASP. I've lived and worked for about 20 years in Africa, Asia, and Southeast Asia. Before returning to the UK, where I've been working for most of the last 20 years, first at ODI, Overseas Development Institute, now at INASP, on how to ensure that research and knowledge is at the heart of development. And we also have many other colleagues from INASP. We have John Harl, Director of Programs, Verity Warren, Head of Marketing, Communications, Business Development, Andy Nobes, Sian Harris, Communications Specialist, and Josie Dryden, Program Assistant. I think I forgot to say Andy Nobes runs Author Aid for us. So we're all here to join in with and facilitate the conversation. And it's great that you're able to join us. And we're looking forward to a good conversation. Again, for those who have joined us just for the afternoon, this is just part of a longer process. So this started as conversations between the conveners. Are there technological ways in which we can strengthen the ability of Southern researchers to engage with policy and practice? And then conversations with colleagues in the Author Aid network, led particularly by Andy and Hasib. And then some collaboration on a Padlet pin board. And if you're interested to look at the pin board, the address is there. So there's already been quite a lot of dialogue and discussion, and some challenges have been identified. And then we have these two sessions in the DSA. The first one, which was this morning, looking mainly at challenges, trying to identify those challenges which are important, where it does seem as though technology could help. And then this session, which is to look at those in more detail and see if we can define that more clearly. And then the idea is after the DSA, we will go into application design workshops, pilot these things on Author Aid or elsewhere, and then a review workshop sometime next year. And that if there is sufficient interest of this group of people in continuing to look at these sorts of challenges, evolving into a community of practice. So that's where these two sessions today sit. And just some quick housekeeping for those who weren't here this morning. We're recording the session and the recording will be available on the DSA website, I think, for 3 weeks. We have plenaries and group work. I'm not sure if I remember to say Josie Dryden from Inaspis here, who will help moving people around. If you get lost, send her an email or a chat. In the meetings, we'll tend to mute everyone except the speaker. Please raise your hand either physically or little blue hand in the participants column if you want to say something. We'll be making notes. We'll share everything afterwards, and afterwards we'll be sending around a survey form and also information about how to continue the conversation. So this is the agenda for part 2, so welcome back. I've done that. Challenges recap, I'll do that very briefly in a minute, and then I'm going to hand over to Patricia, who's going to carry on talking about the summary of what came out of this morning and how we're going to work more on it during the course of the afternoon. And then after that, after some group work, we'll come back together to share what's emerged from the group work, and then right at the end talk about the next steps. So that's the plan. We have an hour and 35 minutes, and I think this is, Trish, where I hand over to you.
Okay. So just to recap, so John, did you want me to recap on the challenges?
Oh, sorry, yes, I was going to do it. No, please go ahead, you do it.
Okay, all right, that's fine. So we started off with the 4 key challenges, and a lot of work had been done on Padlet already before starting the workshop this morning. So the one about access to data and findings, so how could we improve our research and our impact through data and findings? How could we look at improving the collaboration challenges that exist and communicating and building those communities and sharing information together? And they work together, there's a group work together on that, and we'll have a look at what came out of that. And some of you who are here now, thank you very much for your great contributions as well. And then we also looked at capacity and incentives. So how could we think about scaling up? What were the issues? What were the complexities in that? And it really resonated with challenge form, politics and power. So how could we think about bringing about change and bringing about impact? And a lot of people articulated the problem or the challenge with working with policymakers. So a lot around how do we bring those collaborations together and what might help us. And then the challenge after that was to start to think about, could technology help us in any way? So if you'd like to move on to the next slide, John. We want to look a little bit at what those challenges were. So what we've done is we've split those challenges that came out and those solutions again into 2 groups. And what we're going to do is I'm going to talk through what those technology solutions that came out of session 1, and then think about how we might sketch a deeper insight into those together when we go and work in our groups. So again, we've split into two parts. So again, working on challenge 1 and challenge 2, and challenge 3 and challenge 4. So we'll have 2 groups. So if you could move to the next slide, John, please. So when we were looking at challenge 1 and challenge 2, so remember that was about the data and the findings. So us as researchers developing impact, thinking about how we share research, how we can improve on that, and also about collaboration and communication, which is, how do we then collaborate, communicate? There were 3 key aspects that came out of that we've summarized up. There was a lot of work done, a lot of great ideas that came together, and we've summarized them here to explore a bit further when we're working together. So one was on connectivity. So what do we mean about that? About our research and our data infrastructures, and how do we bring those together? So there was a lot of ideas around grid computing. What might that be? Some of the technical frameworks that might that sit under there that could help us share our research and share the data and the use of the data. Another aspect from that session was what we classed as awareness. So being aware of open source technology. And that's really great because you can build easily on open source, and you can get access to really the current thinking and ideas and ways that was going to help further in sharing your research. And then the final part was about individual practice. So how can we create sustained research through data and research archiving? So what do we need to do as individuals to support and sustain our research going on to the future? And so this sat around, as I say, the data findings and research that we're working together on, and then about how to communicate and collaborate as one session. So that will form one group. They're working together collaboratively. If you can move to the next slide, please, John. So in challenge 3 and 4, so challenge 3 was based around capacity and incentives. So how do we build capacity? What would we need to do? Where might technology help us? And also on power and politics. So how do we make change? How might that happen? And of course, the fourth challenge is very much a social construction, but technology can potentially help us in some ways. So we looked at this and we've classed this as a relationship building, which is really important, because if you want to transform in communities, it's very important to build those relationships and get to know those people, those stakeholders that are really important to work with. Some really great work came out of there, thinking about how platforms would work and how that collaboration might work. And through technology, how might we improve those sort of links together between researchers and policymakers? Some of the participants talked, and I've classed it as responsible design frameworks, but really about good design frameworks that help us govern the practice to promote this collaboration, which we've put here as co-design of research. So thinking about governance, people that talked about the respect of the researchers and how do we know that this research can be used by the policymakers. And participants talked about, well, then, this is what this framework would help us with. And then the use of technology platforms as a catalyst to help foster that trust and credibility, because another discussion that came out was that tricky bit between the sort of disconnect, I suppose, between the policymakers and researchers. Very common globally, it's not just unique to the global south, but building up that understanding and perspective and sharing that value both nationally and internationally research. So they are the two areas that we'll be focusing on, and we'll be able to move into groups after I've gone through the process that we're going to use to try and bring our research and our thinking together. So again, we've created 2 forms to help capture the information and data and promote the discussion. So if we could go on to the next slide, please. So what we've used here is that the approach we're going to use is a storyboarding approach. People might have used that approach before to sketch a solution. And it really is just a way for us to think and to bring out the challenges to the solutions and help us think about what we want to see. And there's 6 boxes in this process. And it's built on the idea of maker community methodology, where we come together and we think about and we collaborate and we iterate around the process. Suggested that you spend about 5 minutes on each box, but really the 2 key boxes are box 1, which is the challenge, the discussion. So there'll be some questions there that come out of relating to the challenge. So for challenge 1 and challenge 2, again, about data and quality of data and findings, and about how to collaborate and communicate. And there's some questions around that you might want to refine and elaborate and be clear in your group on that. And then moving over to, if we were to solve, this is perhaps the most important part of this session, if we were to solve this challenge and get access to better data and research and be able to share and promote our research more effectively and collaborate and communicate, what would we see differently? What would really happen? What would be the outcome? So imagine that we had the solution. How would the world look? So putting in there what you would see differently, how would that impact us? What would, so what would happen to our research? What would happen to the change that people would see in the communities nationally, internationally? And so that's an important part. And box 6 might take you a bit longer than 5 minutes. Some of the other boxes, although we've classed it as 5 minutes, maybe a bit quicker. The other thing to remember, it isn't iterative, it's a creative process. It's about your thinking. You might have different views. That's all fine. That's really great. and you put those together, because it's about sharing those ideas and those perspectives that will help us think more deeply about the solution. So once you've done that transformation and thought about what that solution is, we've got another 4 boxes. So if you could move on to the next slide for me, John. I would then suggest that you go to box 2, and that's your stakeholders. Well, you may not need to spend 2 minutes there, maybe very quick. You may think, well, these are the people. You just debate about who it is that you need to be as part of that process. And that helps you think about how you need to build that community. In the first session, people were talking about bringing, for example, policymakers in at the very beginning of developing research and research solutions, so that they understood the process, so there was an exchange of that process. So that would be an example where you think, well, these people, and understanding your key stakeholders early on can really help in improving that potential impact. In the box 3, we talk about data. There's been a big discussion around data. So is there particular data sets or particular ways that you need to think about data to solve this problem? And what might they be? So you know, a lot of things these days, especially in Europe, and I think more globally, is about privacy, protection of data, and so on. And there might be things around that, or barriers to data and so on. But what data might help you solve this problem, and thinking about those kind of aspects in this box. In box 4, it's technology. And what you will find on the form is that there's already some text that came out of session 1 that went through some technology and potential ways to help solve this problem. And you might want to use some of those things. You might want to elaborate. You might want to think about some new aspects. Some of that solution will also fit into box 5 and discuss further and deeper. We had a lot of discussion about aspects that would work then. So that's the whole process then, and hopefully you'll get back to solution 6 in box 6, and the solution still has those elements that you started off thinking that's where you wanted to get to, should you be able to solve what happened in box 1. So that's the whole process. Are there any questions before we go any further, or anybody like to add anything at this stage? Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to spend 30 minutes. You've got 30 minutes to work in your groups. We're going to do the same as we did this morning, which is just, I think, John, are we going to work on this idea of putting people into, then choose the group that they want to work in?
Yes, I think that was the idea, to have the 2 groups. I was just wondering, do we have a reminder slide of the 2 groups? But we don't really, do we?
So what was that, John?
Just a reminder so that people can, or can you summarize what the 2 groups are?
All right, sorry, I see what. So you've got the first group, which worked on challenge 1 and challenge 2. So that's about the data and the findings. So how you develop and share your research and your findings, and also about communication and collaboration. So that was challenge 1 and challenge 2. And challenge 3 and challenge 4 was about capacity building and incentives, and politics and power.
Okay, let me just show, I'll just show this this slide, and then we get people to do what we did before, put our hands up. Hold on a sec. So the first group is challenges 1 and 2, and the second group is challenges 3 and 4. And I think we were going to ask people to put their hands up. Are you going to do this, Josie, so you can put people into groups?
Okay, so as with last time, please may you go to the participants list, and then you should see an option to raise your hand. So for challenge 1, please may the people who would like to join that group now raise their hands.
Is this indicating nobody wants to work on this group, or are people raising their real hands? What we need are your little blue hands in the participants panel.
Or you can write it in the chat too, if it's
Okay.
easier. Your name and the group one.
Okay, so I've got 2 names for that group so far. Okay, 3.
So just to say, Josie, for this group, it's challenge 1 and challenge 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think we have four people.
Mm-hmm.
3 in the chat box, and 1 has raised hand.
Okay, I've got those 4. And then I'll put everyone else in the other group. Great. Okay, is everyone ready? Fab.
So, John, do you want to?
I'll share my screen again, shall I?
Yeah.
Solution 2 form. Let's see what happens. Can you see that now? Can you see the form?
Yes, I can see the form.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. Okay. So that's the bit at the top we wanted to show. Okay, right. I'm on typing duty now.
You might want to zoom in a bit, John, if you want us to see it as
okay.
well, because it's quite small on the screen, if that's possible.
Yeah, it is. How do I do that in Google?
There's a
yeah, here it is. Here it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Better.
There we go. Is that okay?
So, I thought if we gave everybody a couple of minutes to have a read through sketch of the technology solution, and then to read these challenge questions, and then we can have a discussion. So does that sound good? If people have a couple of minutes to read through, and if there's any comments, if people want to put any comments while we're, then please feel free to do that in the chat. can, because I can see that we've only been given 30 minutes for this, but we actually should get 40 minutes because we've got 25 minutes remaining.
Should I jump out? Do you want me to jump out and go and or to send Josie a message? I can do that.
Okay, okay, thanks. Has everyone had enough time to have a look through? Oh, okay. So I'd just like to get some people's input onto looking at the challenge and to elaborate this a bit further. So thinking about, I mean, some of you, I don't know who was here. Victor, you were here this morning. I don't know who else was here. I think other people I knew. So you might have some questions or some thoughts that you'd like to add around this challenge of capacity and incentives and politics and power. So yeah, I'm very happy for you to talk, or if you want to put some of your thoughts into the text, it's up to you. If there's anything else anyone would like to add. So do you feel this captures the problem that we want to look at in a way? Is everyone happy with those statements?
I think Housekeeping wants to say something. Yeah.
I think it has touched upon three basic issues when we talk about interaction between researcher and policymakers. It talks about opening up communication channel between them, and we have learned that trust is one of the major issues that actually hinders between use of research in policy making and changing in practice. But one thing is important in, as we have heard in the morning session, in many cases, policy or plans are being made not only at national level, but also local level or regional level, subnational level. So how these two levels or two layers are handled, it is also quite important. And the third bullet point actually touch upon that. So I think it kind of summarizes what we have discussed, but I'm inviting other colleagues who are in this group to share some of their thoughts. I can see some familiar names who were in the morning session. Please jump in.
Okay, so thanks for that, Hasib. So maybe then, maybe what we want to do is to think about if we can solve this, what might we see that's different? How might this be transformed? So what should be different for us if we are able to make this change? So has anyone got any thoughts about if we're able to solve this problem? So, okay, so we would have a shared vision. Would you like to expand a bit more about that? How you would see that shared vision?
This is Aurelia. Just to expand a bit on that, is just I think one way we can build a consensus and trust with policymakers as researchers is to really identify common objectives and a common goal that we want to achieve, probably for a particular time, and then at least that will align all our interests, where we are aligned in terms of our interests and expectations. So I think working through a shared vision would really help to align our agenda.
Okay. Has anything got more around that people would like to contribute? So that's interesting from John. The different groups already have their own platforms and communities, but they need to see the value in coming together into same spaces networks. So what is the added value? That's important. That interdisciplinary, is that something that people feel also it's challenging to do? So being able to support interdisciplinary connections and the value add. It's quite hard as well. It's quite hard working in your own field and then trying to work across disciplines. Would you like to say something, Victor? You said you agree with John. Would you like to elaborate?
I mean, can I say something? I mean, surely the added value is that these networks intersect. At the moment, they're separate, and what we need to do is to bring them together.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's true. So, I mean, so the output of that, if we were able to bring these people together and we were able to sort of get these communities to talk, we would see more shared knowledge. And we would see that that knowledge would probably be more local and nationally contextualized to the situation, as opposed to looking externally to perhaps what's classed as quality results, but not necessarily relevant to the problems that people are facing in their national local teams.
Is it not a very simple thing that we could say, if we've got here how to support national and relevant and local relevant research impact, is an outcome not simply that research impact is increased?
Yes.
As a result of this.
So
I'm going to pull that text across as well.
It would also be maybe this is implicit in the impact statement there, but a genuine ability to solve a problem in a sustainable, effective way.
Yeah, I think that's true, and you'd be able to see the that would fit with the vision. So if you have the vision and the common understanding of where you're trying to get to, you'll start to see pieces of that come together, and understand why you're working towards that. So understanding the significance of your own research and the policymakers understanding the significance of that research to bring it together. So yeah, that you would see that value add.
I wonder if there's something in this which is bringing together two communities, broadly speaking, who are defined by being experts. But to work together, they need to be able to acknowledge the limits of their knowledge and expertise. And there's a vulnerability in that. There's a kind of admitting you sort of don't know something, or you don't have an ability to answer this problem.
Yeah.
And there's a discomfort about that, isn't there? When you are meant to be the expert in the policy area in a ministry, say, or you're meant to be the kind of expert in a body of academic knowledge.
Yes. Yeah, being able to, I mean, that's one of the things we're all expected to have all the answers quite often. And we, you know, and that makes it quite difficult for change to come about, because people then sort of can only do what they understand. But if you have that inclusive approach of, across these systems, then you'll get better setup there, better integration. So should we move on from looking at the solution? We can sort of see where things would improve. Should we do, or is there anything else people like to add, or should we move on to the stakeholder?
Trish, could you please highlight the main points, because there are quite a few changes we are expecting. Could you please just to give us a broader vision? For example, there is a shared vision is one thing. We are talking about increase of impact.
Yes.
I was just trying to see that what's the major change we will be seeing at the end of the whole process, when the trust is built, when the communication channel is much more efficient, when we have both local and regional perspective or research impact at both regional and local and national level. So what are the big transformation actually, if we have all these small ones? What do you think? What is your thought?
So what you would get for that community, there's two things that would happen. One, you get a more closer working relationship on authentic problems in the community, so it'd be very sensitive around those contexts, and that would be more efficient. So you'd be using more efficient, you'd be able to take more risk because of the trust. So you would be prepared to take on more technologies to test out. The technologies would work better for you, not because they were built better, but because you would have the capacity to work with those technologies more effectively. You probably get more innovation as a result of that, creative and innovation, because you've got that feel valued and shared, so you feel that there's a value in solving these problems if you can see that those solutions are happening. So you'd see different aspects that exist in communities, but they exist in pockets of communities. So you would see a much bigger result of that. Where you see pockets of excellence, you would see bigger results of excellence. So they would be the kinds of things that would happen. And that harmonization fosters sort of better way to think about how to take on new challenges, and often rather than, I think there's a problem, isn't there, in change. Change is difficult.
Sure.
So yeah, so that would, there would be the key things. You would see that, take a pocket of excellence and imagine that people were able to have that across the community. So that impact, as John said, would be visible.
Thank you. I think we can move to and try to address the other questions in other boxes.
Is that okay? What I've written there, is that okay?
Yes, to me. Yeah.
Does it bear any resemblance to what anybody said? Okay. That sounds like a good place to be and work, doesn't it? Let's go there.
Yes.
John, shall we move to the other?
Where should we go to?
So shall we quickly look at stakeholders? Who needs to be involved in this process? So it'd be good to hear from Victor or Jesua.
Can I start?
I would also say, this is Aurelia, I would say, for instance, in the Kenyan context, as I had previously mentioned, we have a lot of development partners who fund policy processes. And I think they're very important in terms of coming together to be able to see how they can, because I think they also influence what is researched and what is funded. So I think they'll be important to be part of the stakeholders.
Yeah, it is also true for my country, Bangladesh, because development partners, or often we call them donors, they have a great influence in policy, creating evidence, and often using those evidence in policy formulation. Maybe a bit rare using research directly, but there is scope, and we have been seeing increasing of that in recent years.
So I fear you said something which I didn't write down. Should I be writing down something more? Or is it captured in that development partners?
Yeah, I think what she says, yes, you have captured that. You have captured.
What about a sort of community people who are affected by these changes? Is that something that you would engage in as well?
I would also add, in certain cases, definitely, because communities, they are the one, maybe in terms of power, they are not at that level, but in terms of impact, definitely I would include them. And I would also include the intermediary, I would call them, between policymakers and the community. You may call them the NGOs or development practitioners. They often work as a conduit between policy making or decision making and implementation on the ground. So they can actually facilitate the voice of the community, their need, which is often missing. Even they can voice that not only to the decision making, but also what evidence should be gathered. Because researchers might not always have that kind of access, which NGOs and development practitioners have. So it would be interesting to have them as one of the stakeholders. Thank you.
And Arula says technology gurus, which is true, having the different experts of which one. But you sort of want technology gurus who will actually listen to what the users want as opposed to giving them what they be tricky. Well, that's true, it's very true. So is there any more on stakeholders that we should consider?
Yeah, I think we should consider academic institutions too.
Very good.
Because somehow they produce some of this, they produce researchers. Somehow there's a network. We could include them because I think there's a lot of ways they could also help in terms of this platform, in terms of the kind of trainings they offer students in developing their career paths and all that. So I think they will also be a very good and important stakeholder in the.
Yeah. Is there anything else on stakeholders that we should think about?
Can I just say, do we also need the institution's policy makers sitting? So what you're saying is the researchers, they sit in institutions and the institutions shape the work of the researchers. Would we want to add the same up here? I'm just wondering, could we just add and their institutions, or do you think it's unique to academic institutions?
John, I agree with you. They have their own institutions and I think they should be included. For instance, here in Nigeria, the National Assembly, as we call it, that's where you have both the House of Representatives and the Senate, they have what we call the National Legislative Institute. Now, this institute is supposed to carry out research work that help inform policies and also help inform the kind of laws they make. So such an institution like that, I don't know if it exists in other parts of the world, should be part of such a platform like this.
How will you tell me, are you Grand Commander? I said it's the Grand Commander that you will now just say this. Who are those?
John, I was just thinking, all these stakeholders, obviously we will be moving to the other boxes. All these stakeholders are present in a particular country or state, but still things are not moving. Is it like we need some external kind of facilitator who have a grasp of all these and can actually facilitate the process? Because all the stakeholders are not coming together. For example, organizations like INAS, other organizations, who can actually act as a kind of a glue or help them to come together, help them to talk to each other.
So we're probably going to get pulled back into the main room in about 2 minutes, but we do have another 10 minutes, so we will be able to come back to complete this as well.
I think we have covered enough stakeholders.
Yes.
We can try to look into technology and data a bit.
Yeah. So what kind of data do you think needs to be sort of supported to facilitate this solution? So, I mean, one of the things that comes to mind listening to you, Hasib, and the other participants is that there's the sort of, it's knowing who you need to talk with, isn't it? It's quite tricky. It's knowing who that person is and getting to that information. So having those good sort of the data that tells you about those people or those organizations that can help you. You kind of need like a matchmaking facility that brings people. It's the particular kinds of data that we need that would help us.
Can I say something? Stories. I like stories.
Mm-hmm.
Other people may not agree with that.
I usually say narratives and stories, storytelling and narratives, yeah.
I mean, it seems to me that's what policymakers like, stories much more than they like numbers, and certainly much more than they like thick reports, but I suppose it depends.
Would you class that as a case study as well? Would you put those together? Would they represent a case study for you, or a persona type of?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are. Sorry, who was that? Somebody else.
It's Hasib. John or Trish, when you say stories or case studies, what sort of stories we are talking about? Are we talking about that how actually things worked, those success stories, how institutions came together and make certain changes? What kind of stories we are talking about here?
Well, personally, I would say it's whatever story persuades the listener, and to different people on different issues want to hear different sorts of stories. I mean, policymakers who are facing a real challenge, for example, in Indonesia, reducing petrol subsidies, they want to know, give me an example of where reducing subsidies has worked. So that's a kind of an answer type story. So I think it depends on the process and the people. So there are all sorts of different kinds of stories. We're going to get bumped out in 10 seconds. Shall we just stop talking and wait until we're put back in the group?
Yes.
1 second.
Like another 10 minutes. Yeah.
We're holding our breath until we get back in our breakout room.
Oh, we were doing pretty well. We're going back, are we?
Oops.
Hi.
Oh, hang on, what have I done now? Hang on, I've lost it. There it is, phew.
Yeah, you're the one with the...
Have you saved it? Yeah.
We're relying on Google to do what it needs to do.
That's true. That's true.
So we were talking about the you were asking about the narratives and examples, yes, of how things work. And I think that's sort of another thing really when we think about understanding how to explain our mechanisms and our insights to people outside of our expertise. They're very good strategies to use, and having those examples is helpful.
So I think we could also include findings of research
yes.
as part of the kind of data.
So in the UK, we have these sort of data centers where we put our after we've done research, we make it we anonymize the data, we make it publicly available and so on. So it can be used and built on. Is that something that's common in other countries where you've got a place where where people have access to that?
No,
to that data?
not, at least not in Bangladesh, the way you are saying. What do you call it in the UK? Repository, national repository or something?
Yeah, we've got a few of them, a few universities, and then there's a European one as well now, which means that when you publish a piece of research, you have to make the data, it has to be non-sensitive, of course, in that it can't be identifiable available, so other people can actually look at the data and run the experiments and can use the data to do other things, to develop their own research potentially, you know, like the genome project and so on. There's that sort of, you've got other data that sits like social science data and things. And it's kind of standardized, you know, and if you get funding, it's part of the agreement with the funding that you'll do that.
I think what we have in Kenya is we have the national, is the science and technology body that authorizes research, and every time you do a research and you have sought their permission, you have to take a copy. But what I find is that they don't do a lot with that research, and I think it's a potential source of a lot of data that can be mined. And instead of having so many primary data studies, we could mine the secondary data and make something out of it.
Yeah, that's really important, actually, Aurelia. And when I work with students, I mean, it's sort of, we ask us the secondary data that we can use, and you try to build on that first before you try and collect, because the primary data is very expensive and time consuming to do. But then there's also the considerations about data bias, because some of the way some of the data is being collected, or how it's being collected, it doesn't necessarily have what we need in it. So maybe it's useful to know how to know the limitations of the data that's there, that we're using as well. So as well as using secondary data, also understand what might be limited by that data.
We have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes left.
I'm just dropping things in what seem to be appropriate boxes.
Well done, John. You're doing a great job. Thank you. Not an easy job being the note take. Good. So shall we say anything about the technology? Do you want to say it? Because we talked a lot this morning about the technology and this platform and this responsible kind of design of the platform. Are we happy with what we took this morning, or is there anything more that we want to add to that?
I think in the morning we had quite an excellent discussion, not only the platform itself, but how it will be built, the framework we also talked about, and what other support is needed to make it effective.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. I think it has been captured in the preamble above the table.
Yeah.
So we can bring them kind of down and put them some of the issues in appropriate boxes. Yeah, thank you.
I also agree. I think we should really highlight that of a framework, because it's very important, because whatever we have here, we'll ultimately need a framework.
Yeah.
So under the box 5, what else do we need? I think we could put the framework.
Yeah.
Okay, underpinning framework. That's all right.
Yeah, you gave some good inputs, some great inputs this morning about that, about having a framework so that you could determine with the process the kind of quality and the way that that the engagements were working, the kind of the collaboration between the researchers and with the policymakers. That was quite important. We've got some notes on the other document that we used this morning, so collected all that there. So we still have a lot of that. That's very important. You're right. we've got about 2 minutes left. Is there anything else that we want to add at this point? When we go back, we'll have, I believe, 10 minutes per group to present our results back if we want to and discuss them in the plenary. So I don't know if there's anything specific we feel we should add at this phase, at this stage.
I think we have more or less covered quite a bit. We have touched and detailed out, as much as possible given the time.
Yeah.
Let us present it so that we can get feedback from the other group.
Okay.
I'm just putting pluses in here because I think we're starting to illustrate them, and there will be others. But Trish, in terms of the kind of design approach you're talking about, is this a sufficient basis for the next step, which would be the sort of more detailed design type workshops?
So I mean, from the 2 reports that we've got now, we would be able to look at thinking about the things. So I mean, there's some common things I think coming out of both groups about what they want to do and why, and I think that sort of sits down, if you want to build a, so that matchmaking to me is something that's quite important, and also around context. So the searching is context specific to the needs of the problem that you're trying to work in, and those important dissemination engagements. And I think it's highlighted that being able to, that communication is so important, so that you're building on that knowledge. So yeah, I think there's some things that are very interesting, and I think very common globally, that we all struggle with at times. We've got 48 seconds, 47.
Do we have to have somebody who's prepared to talk through this, Trish?
We are meant to, yes, yeah. We do. Is that it? Would you like me to do that, John, or would you like to do it? Or
No, I'm just the secretary. I'm the typist.
I can do it if nobody else wants to do it. As best I can, and then you can all correct me when I forget things. I'm very happy for anyone else if they want to do it. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for all your hard work.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
See you in the
Let's
other
meet
room.
In the main room.
Yes. Are we all back? Josie, have you lost anybody?
There's a couple of people just re-entering now.
Okay. Okay.
There we go.
So, am I right? I'm chairing this session. Is that right?
Yes, so this is now, we're going to give out the feedback. So each group's going to feedback what they discussed, the main points.
Yes. Am I chairing this?
And I don't know if we had a chair for it, but you can chair it if you want to. And because we've got 2 groups, we actually originally we had 4, so now we have 10 minutes per group. So does group 1 want to present their findings and talk through what came out of their discussions?
I wondered if, as myself and Sean were doing quite a lot of sort of coordination in the group, if somebody else from our group would like to talk, maybe Vanessa or somebody else. Amma, you had some really interesting points.
Would you like me to share my screen so that whoever else was in the group can see what I should do that?
It would be great if Amma or someone from the group participants were really thoughtful. So
okay.
Do you feel like it,
I can
Amma?
Yes, that's fine. I can walk
Good.
us through. I may not get everything, but I'm sure anyone else can support. So box 1 looked at the key challenges. We identified 2 for this group. We had access to data and findings, and then we also had issues to do with channels for collaboration. I think what we wanted to also do was to flag that it was also a problem to do with coordination at different levels and how we can more effectively coordinate at research at different scales. So that is sort of elaborating on the 2 challenges that were identified in the previous session. So with stakeholders, we identified a number. So we have demand, supply, so who is producing, who is using, more or less. So we have a whole spectrum of users and producers, researchers, librarians, university management. Yes, so we have a long list of people who produce and use data sets. Again, we flag the use of data sets by communities. Most of the times we don't think they are relevant, but they really do play a key role in data. They provide us with the data, they use the data as well. So NGOs, and then the issue of breaking down the silos when it comes to central level agencies and district level agencies, that needs to be recognized when it comes to stakeholders as well. Grassroots involvement, very important. National Statistics Offices, very important as well. So I mean, looking at this whole range of people and agencies who are engaged in this process, that should tell you the challenges when it comes to actually accessing data. The roadblocks can be very, very varied on different levels. Okay, so let's look at data. How much data is produced. What we know from our discussion is that quite a number of data is published. Most of it could be, locked up in archives that most researchers will never have access to. So again, it comes back to the same problem of transparency and what we need to actually get people to start sharing the data they have. Again, to do this, we need to also talk about standards. For example, in Ghana, we have started talking about interoperability between data sets and the fact that we really need to be guided by a legal framework to allow people to be able to share their data without fear of having the data going to third parties. So again, this is something we need to flag. On technology, we talked about having a central server at the national level to actually have a kind of a data repository where you can have people access it. Again, awareness is very important. Most times we don't know where the data systems are, and again, this is not just for national level issues, international as well, so we need to start finding ways and means of allowing people to see where data is and then coordinating the existing technology to help make data more accessible. One of us mentioned cloud technology. Again, this has a caveat because a lot of privacy issues come up. Cloud technology is very good, but we also know that people do not trust some of these technologies, and so we will need to build awareness to make this something that people want to engage in. University database is a good place to start as well, because we know that universities have a lot of students who do a lot of research, scientists who do a lot of research. So that is a really good place to start, making databases more transparent and more available to different people to use. The box 5. Here we talk about what we think will help solve the problem. Again, we talk about collaboration, co-creation, as the new buzzword is, co-production, how to get people to work together. So again, I have been engaged with communities of practice for more than 5 years now, and it's been a very big source of improvement to the level of awareness I have about what is going on in my field of work. I can imagine how many people will benefit from these kind of forums, public forums that engage different people in different areas. Okay. So we also talk about bottom-up engagement, involving all stakeholders, again, co-creation and co-production. Yes. Finally, we talk about what kind of transformation will take place if all this works out. And so this is where we want to get to, this is the final point. So we talk about transformation taking place where data is available, it's transparent, it ties in with what people want to do with data sets, and less fragmentation. I think there's more room to add more to this, and anyone in our group can add if I've missed anything. Thank you.
Hey, very good.
You were super.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Thank you. You did all the work.
That was very good. Is there any questions from our group to So solved it, John. That's it. It's all solved. Okay. Who would like to? Who would like to do group 2? Don't know if any of the people from us, if Victor or sorry, I can't find. Oh, she's gone. She's gone. Person knows. Okay. Do you want to move on to group 2? John, can you upload the slides again or not?
Sorry, do you want to see the slides or do you want to see the document?
Sorry, the document.
The document. Okay, I can share it. Yep. Hold on. Yep. I need to make it bigger again, I think, don't I? Okay, are you going to do the talking, Trish, while I do the scrolling?
Yeah, I can do the talking, you can do the scrolling. Unless anybody else wants to do the talking, I'm very happy to offer that. So we were looking at Challenge 3 and Challenge 4, so really around community engagement, so capacity and incentives, and politics and power. Very interested in how we connect the different levels between the national level and the subnational level. And it was very important to develop an idea of trust, which is not always about technology, if in fact it is about technology at all, but how do we get that trust and value if we're going to work with policymakers, if researchers and policymakers are going to work together. And there were the sort of key areas of how we were going to do that that came out of the previous session. So there are a number of stakeholders, a bit like the previous session that Anna was talking through. There's a lot of different stakeholders needed to be involved. And we were looking at the range of researchers and policymakers and their institutions. So how do they inform the way that we work? Person from Nigeria, who I don't think she's here anymore. She was talking about the National Assembly in Nigeria that's used. with their research policies. And we were talking about how we have these sort of data centres in the UK where we share research data, and there's one in Europe, and we were exploring, does that help in this process and understanding where those centres are. And the funders, so looking at who the funders are being involved with the processes. Getting these communities to work together, so working within the communities where this research and policies are of interest. And that's quite difficult to do. So we've got we looked at, could NGOs help facilitate that process? Of course, technology gurus, that came up, having the right expertise there. External organisations, so it may be needed to bring these people together, and the research councils. So looking at data, so it's interesting. So I think this is probably where the areas where the sort of data part is different from looking at the research-centred part for challenge 1 and challenge 2. When you get to challenge 3 and challenge 4, we're talking more about capacity and community and engaging and sharing at a different level. So one of the nice ideas was the idea of stories, using stories to help bridge that so that people understood the impact of that work. So I think that comes back to the researchers understanding how to present outside of their field their ideas and what kind of data can help us do that. So we're talking about narratives and stories, case studies, and that helps the policymakers. And the research findings and these repositories are important, and I think that was identified as well, but we're looking at a much higher level. How do we communicate those clearly? Coming to the technologies, so we had there's a lot of interesting work this morning in this area, and there's some nice notes came out in the previous document that we did. So we've just summarized a bit here about the technology. Sort of needing the data mining tools from the archive. So why is that? Why do we need these platforms? What are these platforms going to do, and how are they going to help us in this dissemination and coming together? So we're sort of thinking about, so we're looking, I'm actually talking to cross between box 4 and box 5 here. So looking at matchmaking facilities, why? How's this context of this data and information going to come together and help people connecting with their tools? So bringing that together, this collective. Interesting, knowing where the data is. So sometimes a bit like the internet, we know the answer's out there somewhere, but which answer and how to get to it. So again, having these really good filters and processes. So at the beginning, we talked about what would happen if we could solve this problem. What difference would we see if we were able to solve this problem? And we would have much better results, both nationally and locally, that there would be two things: the way the information and the research, and it was set out as a vision, if we've got a common vision, a shared vision, but also trust. If we've got that trust, we will get better development of the solutions, investments in the solutions. In fact, technology will become more effective in a sense, because often what happens is when you've got distrust, it's interesting, technology actually heightens that distrust. And as you start to build trust, the technology, it becomes just a tool in the process, a catalyst in that process. So we would start to see more effective research, results coming through, alignment with policymakers, valuing each other's work, which is important, and trusting. And that just fosters a better way you're prepared to take more risk in your development, which would improve the local communities and nationally the impact of the work that you do. And you'd learn from each other, because we'd be more trusting, we would learn from each other. So there's a huge impacts that could happen if we can develop that relationships that are needed in the right place. We can look at pockets of where that works in excellence. We know ourselves when that works really well, things go very quickly, and we can take on more challenges and solve more problems. And then that would bring, that would highlight, that would help inform policy, policy would help inform research, and it'd be more innovative and creative, because we would be able to go further with our thinking and not stuck sometimes in these bounds. I think that was kind of what we covered. I don't know if there was anything I'm missing from there, if anybody would like to add to that. Anybody who was there, please feel free to. No comments? Everybody's tired. It's a long day. But yeah, so thank you everybody for your participation. Great.
Can I say something and ask something? I think this is really great. This has been really good exercise during the course of the day and getting clarity about the kind of direction of travel we want to go into and the kinds of end goals we want to get to. Both of these, though, seem very ambitious and very broad, and be quite difficult to do this stuff at the kind of scale which is implied to lots of different stakeholders, bridging people at the same level, bridging people at different levels. I'm just wondering, is there a way of sort of identifying little bits within this which we can do, and how would we go about sort of prioritizing that and starting with this and then building to that? Trish, you're the kind of process expert. I'm just wondering how we would take the next step from this to do that.
So no, I mean, you go through an iteration, so we take on board, and I think you do it incrementally. So you can look at things we can analyze what the requirements are and why, and basically what's easy to do and what's hard to do, and do the easy things bring us some value and steps forward. At some point, there's this very difficult transformation. So if you wanted the global research center hub that sat across the global south, that's a whole different project, and at some point that may happen. But if you're looking to say, well, let's think about how we could improve searching and filtering in local communities, what would be required to do that, and built a pilot around a particular area, that might, because that would be, you'd be able to scale that through if that worked well across different subject domains. So that might be one aspect that you want to do. So, and normally what we do next stage would be to analyze that and think about the things that which is sort of simple steps to pilot, to test out, but also bring some value that people could use. And that's sort of normally the next phase that you do. And that within the community of people that you're working with, the key thing is that it meets to something that's interesting to them, and people understand that it's an incremental step through that process.
I'm just wondering whether any of our colleagues that haven't been, we've been having this conversation within Author Aid amongst ourselves, the conveners, for a long time, whether anybody who hasn't been involved in that conversation can identify specific things within this that would be, something really interesting to look at in more detail. I'm thinking Amma or Meron or Victor or Ibrahim. Are there specific things in this which sort of make you think, oh yes, that sounds exciting?
So I'm not really sure. Is this going to start something different from what we've talked about, or?
No, I mean, I'm just thinking about, as Trish says, the next stage would be to look at this and to process this and to start to identify what would be easy, what could we focus on to develop into a pilot. And I'm just wondering, based on your perspectives, whether there's anything in this that we would take forward in the next stage. I don't think we're not going to take it forward today, but just, small bits of this that might be manageable to develop a pilot and try.
Okay. Even if they are linked to some things that you have already been thinking about or that you are doing, right? That are connected to to your current work or initiatives or ideas.
Yeah. Okay. So for us, what we want to be able to do, probably as researchers, is to be able to reach out to policymakers. That has been one of our key goals. How do we do it using technology? We have tried to move away from the technical reports and publications to more like op-eds and blogs. I'm not sure if we're doing it right. You know, we have worked on our website to try and make it more friendly, to get more people to engage. I'm not sure if that is something that is working. So I think if there's a pilot, it will be how do we use technology to reach out to other stakeholders? That could be very key to the kind of work we do. But that's specific to where I work. I'm not sure about other areas. Thank you. Over.
Yeah. I mean, I think that sounds really interesting. Bringing different stakeholders into our existing spaces, I think might be one way of thinking about it. Does anybody else want to just highlight something that they thought was particularly interesting? I see stuff happening.
Victor is saying, I think there's a suggestion from Victor about reviewing these ideas to small steps that are feasible. That's another approach, right? Like select some ideas and think about what are the first small steps that we can take.
Yeah, okay, no, I see some stuff in the chat. Okay, very good. Well, that's brilliant. Let me just, unless anybody's got anything else to say about this or any other questions, we could sort of move on to the wrap up and next steps.
John, there's a couple of other suggestions in the chat.
Okay. Consortiums, what this consortium's collaboration with our institutions, sharing resources, database, creating awareness. Okay, well, why don't we? I think what we're let me stop sharing this and let me share the next slide, and I'll talk about that then. Hang on, how do I do this? Hold on a second. Okay, share screen again. Share. Oops, hang on, what am I sharing? I think I'm sharing the wrong thing. Let me let's try it again. Share screen. I want to share this one. Okay. Okay, so can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. There we go. Okay, so we said this a bit at the beginning. We have been recording both sessions. We've got a record of all of the chat, everything I know from the first session. We've got all of that now, and we'll get it from this. And we'll put together some notes, and we will share that with everybody who came to the first session or the second session. And I know there are a number of people who couldn't get in for some reason, so we'll share it with them as well. And as I think Trish said earlier on, there'll be a feedback survey. We'll send you a link around that. And then I think what we've got here is this application design workshops. And I suppose it's in those that we would start to do this process, which Trish explained just now, which colleagues started to identify within this, or here are some particular pieces we might work on together. So let's think about organising something like that later on in the year, and then whatever emerges from that. And here you can see a bullet that says piloting on author aid. Well, if something emerges which is sensible to pilot on author aid, we could do that. Or if you have a platform you're using to engage with one set of stakeholders and you'd like to try to engage with another set of stakeholders on your platform, well then maybe we could pilot it there, and then together we can review whether that works or not. So this idea about a review workshop in 2021, and then, as I said earlier on, let's see. Clearly there's quite a high degree of interest in this amongst this group. Let's carry on sharing information and see how it evolves. And it may, if it evolves into a community of practice, that would be great. But it doesn't need to, only if there's a shared common interest and it's generating things which are useful for everybody. So to make sure you're part of that process, if you think we might not have your name and email address, put it in the chat. If you've already given it at the end of the first session, or if you're among the group that we've been sending emails to for the last few weeks, then don't worry, we've got it. But if you think we might not have your email address, make sure you put it in the chat box. and that way you'll get everything. And then also you will get information about how you can get your Institute of Coding badge. Trish, do you want to say more about that?
So I can do, and quickly just sort of let people know. If I've got your email address, I can register you onto the Open Universities platform, where we give out the Institute of Coding badges. So as part of the digital leadership work you've done over these 2 sessions and contributions you've made, we would then be able to allocate you a badge. But to do that, I have to register you on the platform. So you'll get sent a link once I've got your email, register you on the platform, you'll get sent a link. Once you've accepted the link, I can then allocate the badge. And it possibly will take a couple of weeks to do, because there's a couple of other things I have to do first, but that's the process. So basically, you get a badge as part of the Institute of Coding. We recognise digital skills. It's a recognised process for something called the SIFIA skill. So if you'd like one, then that's what we would do. And it's up to you. You don't have to have it, but if you'd like it, it's through your email address. Yeah.
I want one.
You want one? Okay.
Okay, very good. But that's it, really. Does anybody else want to say anything, or shall we just wave and smile and say see you next time?
Thank you so much. It's been an awesome event. This is the first time I've been engaged in this kind of workshop, so really excited about it and the way forward. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you very much for joining. Can I just suggest that there, if everybody who can put on their camera. John is very good at capturing a screenshot of everyone, and then at least we'll have a picture of everybody who's here. So, Aurelia, can you put on your camera? Or not? If you can't, don't do it. But if you can, put it on briefly. Let's take the picture before the system crashes. And that'll be, there we are. Oh, there's Aurelia, there's Amma. Oh, there we are. There's a point of light. Very good. Thank you all very much indeed. It's been a great day. I've really enjoyed it. We will
Thank you very much.
Very soon.
Thank you.
Are you getting a picture, John?
Thank you. Thank you so very much, John.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been fun.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Thank you.